Hello and welcome to this Security Magazine webinar in association with Quosium on the topic of Agile and Secure Development. Can secure development be agile too? I'm Stephen Pritchard and I'm a contributing editor on Security Magazine, and I'll be your moderator for the next hour or so. IT departments are under pressure not just to do more with less, but to do more and to do more quickly. Being responsive to the changing needs of business is essential for most IT development teams now, and in the world where multi-year IT projects are just not an option, companies are looking at quicker ways to deploy new software or to deploy their upgrades. The need to create quick and often lightweight applications is also having an impact here. That ranges from consumer-facing websites to mobile and tablet apps, and that is also increasing the demand for Agile. The question is whether Agile can be secure, and during this webinar we're going to look at the trend for Agile development and explore some of the secure development methodologies and how they and Agile can work together. We'll look at security by design and privacy by design and look at how they work in Agile environments and identify how development and security tools can keep track of software development and make sure that it is secure and stays according to schedule. On our panel today, we've got a distinguished and broad lineup of speakers. We've got Alia Fairchild of the Constantina Institute, who is an analyst, Ian Murphy, also an analyst, a principal analyst, in fact, at Creative Intellect Consulting, Wahid Iqbal, Technical Security Officer at Shop Direct, and Ofer Maurer, who is CTO of Quosium. I'll let each speaker present their overview of the topic in a few brief slides, and after that there will be a panel discussion and a chance for questions from the audience, so please do have your questions ready, and there's a questions screen that you can use to pose them to us. You can direct questions to individual panel members if you like, or if you prefer, just leave them open to the panel and we'll do our best to address them according to our expertise. Don't hold back in posing the questions. The sooner you put them in, the sooner that we can actually think about them and look at who should be best placed to answer them. There'll also be a chance for you to vote in our interactive polling during the session, and there'll be 3 of those. So I'll bring those up in due course, and they'll also be on your slides. So for anyone listening on the replay later, you won't obviously be able to vote, but you'll be able to see the answers to the polls at the very end, and you will see the questions to the polls on the slides as we move through. Before we start, I will just have a quick reminder as well that if you're going for ISC Squared accreditation as part of your continual professional development, there is no need to complete a questionnaire anymore. We now have a system that automatically logs your attendance, and when you registered for the webinar, there's a secondary screen that came up for the Security Magazine channel, and that asked for your ISC Squared registration number. If you put that in and you attend the webinar and you stick with us till the end, you will get the credits. That's probably enough housekeeping for the moment, and I think we should kick off. I'll bring up the first poll question. You'll see that on the screen now, and the pop-up will come up just in a moment. How do you currently manage application security in your Agile development cycle? And the 3 options are: we don't do anything, we use manual processes such as penetration testing or vulnerability assessment, and thirdly, that we use automatic technology. So I shall just make that live now. Apologies for the slight clicks there if you could hear them in the background. Just leave that open during the first presentation. So you have about 10 minutes to vote in that. And now that's done, if I could ask Alia to start off the formal part of the session with her overview of the topic. Alia, if I just hand over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon. My name is Alia Fairchild, and let me introduce myself a bit briefly here. I am an analyst. I'm also an information economist who specializes in enterprise privacy and security, specifically in the areas of compliance and governance, and I'm based in Brussels. No surprise there. My angle here is one of the importance of the data to the enterprise, and therefore my viewpoint is adding security to innovation and development. Now, a few years ago, the Economist Intelligence Unit published a report entitled Organizational Agility, How Business Can Survive and Thrive in Turbulent Times, which obviously we're in now. And this stated basically that Agile adoption allows companies to realize higher quality with greater efficiency, reducing cost to build, change, and support the software. And almost 90% of the executives cited that organizational agility was a key to global success. And research that MIT conducted also suggests that Agile firms grow 37% faster and generate 30% higher profits than non-Agile development firms. And you're thinking, well, gee, why isn't everybody doing this? Maybe it's a function of command and control and building in certain policies in the process. So my point here will be reflecting that business benefits using Agile can be further enhanced by better security, security in this case being by process design fundamentals, supporting greater adoption. And if anybody wants the link to that EIU report, send me a tweet and let me know later. Okay. So So the four main points I'm going to discuss are why Agile versus, of course, Waterfall. What are the business benefits? What is the information security trade-off in Agile? And I'm going to look specifically at a couple frameworks, which I believe my fellow panelists are going to go into a bit more depth in terms of ALM and in terms of SDL. So let's start with the business benefits. The business benefits of Agile can be simplified to basically four things: value, adaptability, visibility, and fit. In particular, Agile development accelerates the delivery of initial business value, and through a process of continuous planning and feedback we'll discuss momentarily, is able to ensure that value is continued to be maximized throughout the development process. So as a result of this iterative planning and feedback loop, teams are able to continuously align the delivered software with the desired business needs, easily adapting to changing requirements throughout the process. So by measuring and evaluating the status based on the truth of how they're working, testing the software, much more accurate visibility into the progress, more progress is actually available or visible to the business. So at the conclusion of a project, you have a software system that is a better address to the business and customer needs. But the main point I want to make here is what needs to happen is security by design and also privacy by design. And it's very important to build into more flexible development methodologies to make them more acceptable to people who are used to more command and control approaches. And I'm going to discuss what fundamental tools and resources that need to be put into place to aid an Agile team in keeping security in the front of mind. Okay. Now, I'm assuming if you're on this call, you know what Agile is, and hopefully you know the difference between Agile and Waterfall. But let's just summarize. Waterfall is a sequential software development model, and basically is seen as flowing steadily downward, like a waterfall, through the phases of requirements, analysis, design, implementation, testing, integration, and maintenance. Agile software development is a conceptual framework and promotes development iterations through sprints in the life cycle of the project. So Agile methods are more face-to-face communication versus written documentation. So you're saying, well, gee, why does Agile in this regard therefore benefit business and business risk in particular? First of all, using Agile mitigates risk. In many cases, perceived risks to the project when you start may not be proved to be risks at all, while anticipated risks may surface out of nowhere. So many risks are only addressed and discovered during integration. And with an iterative approach, you can actually approach this much earlier on because you're actually seeing them in a near continuous process. Okay? You're also able to accommodate change. Change in the requirements and the scope have always been a primary source in terms of Waterfall of trouble for a project, leading to late delivery, missed schedules, unhappy customers, etc. But the iterative approach lets you change the requirements into account as you're going through. And finally, you can build in the quality. Results in a more robust architecture. You can detect flaws earlier and correct them earlier. Bottlenecks are discovered earlier as opposed to being discovered later on in terms of the eve of delivery. And basically, critical function have had the opportunity to be tested over several iterations. The result then is perhaps more mature and higher quality. Okay. So what's the trade-offs for information security? Agile done the right way helps us focus the attention on security requirements. One of my points is basically historically too many developers think Agile equals speed and quickly getting code out the door. In traditional security, assurance comes primarily from expert security reviews at successive stages of development. In Agile security, assurance comes from managing the key risks to the security stakeholders up front. So the trick is to get the developers to be more responsive to the business risk concerns. Now, if you look at the development process, certain Agile processes can be considered a natural match for security, including pair programming and peer reviews, version control, and static analysis of source code. And an integral part of Agile practice is the test-first development, where work is performed in very short cycles in terms of sprints. A test is considered along the business code for it. So as the test module is working, work is continued on the next cycle. So the initial round of security analysis when a project is being discussed in terms of the use case should include a lot of the security issues for the particular business process. So what envisioned systems, what policy, what legal issues, what contractual issues, etc. So if you use the analogy of a process that's going to be using credit card data. Therefore, you're going to have to be dealing with PCI DSS requirements to accept credit cards. So in that regard, you should be looking at what the user wants in a very affirmative way as to how it should be addressed. For example, I want my credit card to be protected versus I want my credit card data not to be exposed. So you can actually articulate what protected means. From there, you should be looking at a prioritization of security requirements and how they should be incorporated into the Agile development lifecycle. And, of course, everything can't be taken care of necessarily, so you're going to have a position where you have security debt. Which uncompleted tasks are going to be relevant when the actual system goes live, and what is the residual risk acceptance, what are the known risks that aren't yet addressed prior to production so the stakeholder is aware of what situation exists. Okay. Now I'm going to bring up two different frameworks here, ALM, and then also I'm going to look specifically at SDL. The problem here is efficiency and focus gained in Agile development tends to skip over the bigger picture, looking at, at the expense of understanding how the system and data are used in a holistic way, particularly when it comes to data security and also in privacy. So I'm bringing ALM into the picture. Why am I doing that? Because basically the use of ALM can provide project visibility with feedback loops that promote just-in-time process customization and continuous development and also continuous delivery. So security becomes part of the baked-in infrastructure and allows knowledge of the security procedures to be baked into that process as well. So you see my comments on the slide regarding risk factors, quality control, ability to work in the cloud, all very important issues at this particular moment, especially given the focus on information security. You're also going to see at the bottom there, in the smaller print, Infotech, which is another analysis firm, has created analysis of functional requirements in the Agile ALM vendor space. And I took a look at this analysis, and it's pretty decent, so I would suggest you have a look at the URL because you can actually look at for yourself what your own environment requirements might be and what tools are actually available in that regard. Okay. One of my main points is the understanding of software security problems is a foundational part of building better software. By allowing individuals involved to understand the development of software programs and to stay informed about security basics and the latest trends in privacy, you're going to increase their commitment into writing more secure software. So here I'm mentioning SDL with various forms, and you'll see basically there in terms of that timeline of security in the SDL process, there are various stages that you can actually be adding iteratively security requirements, threat modeling, for example, overview of design implications of a threat model, coding constraints, etc., into the process. Okay. So to sort of make my suggestions of how information security can be further integrated into Agile development are 3 points. First one is secure coding standards, in essence, security by design. Creating standard security controls in the process. Develop a security training, basically making sure that the controls are built into the process so they understand from the get-go what the issues actually are. And support from security experts, that you have some sort of internal ownership in information security that can be leveraged for assistance. Okay, so to summarize my points, I opened with why Agile is good for business. I talked about information security trade-off in Agile, and I brought ALM and SDL in to try to bake security into the development. And if you want to talk to me after this webinar, you have my details on the screen, and I'll turn it back to you, Stephen.
Well, thank you very much for that, and it certainly opened my eyes to some of the differences between the various types of development methods and how they interact with the security issues that companies may be looking to tackle or may face in their marketplaces. So thank you very much again for doing that, and I will now bring up the next poll questions. So just bring up the questions there, and once again I will read them out. Now, just while I'm reading these, if you haven't voted in the first poll, please, that's your last chance, because I have to turn the first one off to activate the second one. So I'll just read these out firstly, and of course if you're listening on replay, don't try to vote, you won't be able to, but you will be able to see the questions and we'll discuss the results at the end. So the second poll question: when is application security addressed in your development cycle? And the 3 options are: at the end, before major releases, or when compliance requires it; secondly, automatically as part of every build; or thirdly, before, for example, training, peer code security review, and so forth. I'll open that poll now, and I'll also introduce our next speaker, who will be Ian Murphy from Creative Intellect. So I'll just bring up Ian's details here. And whilst Ian kicks off, I will open up the poll. So Ian, if I could just hand over to you.
Certainly. Thank you very much, Stephen. Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Ian Murphy. I'm Principal Analyst at Creative Intellect Consulting UK. Our focus as a company is on the application lifecycle management. We spend a lot of our time talking to practitioners. We do talk to vendors as well, but we much prefer to talk to practitioners. One of the things that's become interesting to us is that the whole issue of security seems to be one of pointing finger rather than resolving problems. I'm going to talk about some of the issues we see, why those issues are there, and how we should be thinking about using Agile to resolve some of them. So let's start with some honest facts here. The security leaks from in-house developed software is not the biggest enterprise security problem. If you look around at the numbers, high up on the list are things like SQL injection. These are operational issues. Operations teams and security teams should be locking down this stuff straight away. We have users leaving unencrypted USB sticks, leaving hard disk drives, losing laptops, tablets, mobile phones, all of these items with corporate data on them. Very few have encryption. Most of them are left on trains or in taxis or in other public places. We have a big problem with the failure to effectively patch and deploy security. This is not a developer problem. This is an operational failure. And this is where the whole issue becomes very confusing here. The focus tends to be that our problems are about developers writing poor code, when in fact the problem does sit across everybody. But when we look at developers, one of the things that we're starting to see is an awful lot of the exploits that are coming along today are based on old code, things that were not seen as exploits 2, 5, 8, even 10 years ago. A lot of that code and a lot of those exploits are based on portions of APIs that are now deeply embedded inside people's software. It is not reasonable to assume that developers can track down a single API, patch it, and then fix. It's not reasonable on two bases. First, nobody knows what APIs after a couple of years have been used and what calls are sitting inside their software. Secondly, when a patch is released by a vendor, they don't identify what it is. They just simply say they're patching product X, Y, or Z. And let's be very serious. No development process, no matter how much you gold plate it, if you wish to get something out there for users to use before it is so out of date that it's like using an abacus today, none of these processes will ever be 100% safe and error-free. Software. It's a competitive advantage to business, but that in itself is part of our problem. We are seeing a real change in the market now. We have the budget being given to business units and taken away from IT. Those business units don't care that it takes time to develop software. They want a piece of software now, and they're starting to become more willing to take incomplete software. This is a major change in the market, and it's one of the things that is driving a lot of Agile adoption at this moment in time. When you look at many of the projects that are underway at the moment, there is no complete list of functionality. There is no complete deadline by which it must be given. There are no testing plans in place before things start. Instead, the focus seems to be, we need something today. We can live with a few of these key features to begin with, as long as we get regular drops of software. There is a point at which that can work very well. If you look at a company like IBM with its WebSphere, they are capable of dropping brand new versions of WebSphere inside 2 months. The fact that they actually only do 2 or 3 releases a year is down to the length of time it then takes them to clarify issues such as internationalization of documentation, making sure they don't have patent issues. When we look at the majority of software used at the critical part of our enterprises, we cannot run this software out the box. So at some point we have to start playing around with software. That ERP package on which the company has just spent £500,000 is going to require another £1 million worth of investment in writing the code that works for this business. Net result, enterprise software really is not workable out of the box. It's got to be massaged. And here we then run into a major problem. When something goes wrong, is it the enterprise software itself? Is it what the developers have done? There's also been a huge surge of applications written by end users that have been working inside a sales team or inside a marketing team, and it was written for one user to solve a problem, and they did it themselves. But then other people around them liked it, and before you know where you are, it's now been decided it's going to be adopted for that entire department, and it's handed to IT. You cannot just take that application. It doesn't scale. It's not stable. It's not documented. It's not in the CMDB. There is no patch management, no change management process wrapped around it. We have to stop, and we have to think about how we solve this. We have to stop just saying all of this is down to developers, because actually it isn't solving the problem whatsoever. As I've already explained, a lot of the issues are not developer related. They're an IT process issue. Some is operational, some is security, some is testing, some is software, some are vendors. But there's one issue on this slide that I really like to hammer home, and it's an issue that I'm afraid is one of my soapboxes, so bear with me for a minute or two. Every single day of every working week, I get press releases from security vendors come across my desk. And they tell me about all these vulnerabilities. They tell me how many they've detected in the last year. They tell me how wonderful they are at finding all these security leaks. Yet when I sit down with the semantics and the Intel/McAfees of this world, and the Kaspersky's and a whole bunch of other people, and I say to them, if you know all these vulnerabilities, where are the libraries that developers can use and plug in to be able to test applications before they go into the field? Where are your solutions for QA teams and for operational teams to make sure that software is fit for purpose? They shuffle their feet, they make an excuse, and admit they have no solution to the problem. So it's very easy for a lot of security vendors to snipe from the sidelines. What's happening here is we're not getting solutions to problems, we're just getting people talk about problems. So let's then look at what Agile actually offers. And in many ways, what Aaliyah has just said to us is exactly where I come from. So Agile is there to deliver something faster. It can be a secure process, but like any development process, it can equally be an insecure process. And it's there because we've moved into a point where people want stuff delivered faster. One of the most important things is the inclusiveness of Agile versus traditional waterfall type methodologies. If we look at Agile, teams are supposed to be made up from all the major stakeholders. Go into an organization that's running Agile and ask them who the security person is on many teams, and you'll find there might be one person who floats between a dozen teams. This is a disengagement problem. If the security team wants to have better software security, they need to engage with the developers as part of the Agile process. We have end users in that process. We have operations teams in that process. Why a security? That's a question you need to ask your own internal teams. One of the things Agile gives us that's really important is its ability to respond to change at the speed of the business. This meets those business needs that we saw earlier, that need for software to be a competitive advantage, that need for time to market being critically important to them. Agile itself is open to secure by design. It has to be. And like any solution, therefore, it has to be an architected solution. It's not simply about a bunch of developers sitting around a table, eating pizza, drinking Coke, and slapping some code together. I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but I've yet to come across it in a commercial environment. So what does effective Agile include if we're going to use it as part of our development process? It includes an architecture. It has to be architected. Let's get away from this idea that Agile is something we just slap together because we can't be bothered doing it properly. If Agile is being used inside your enterprise and you are not architecting your applications, that is a failure of your enterprise architects. It's a failure of your software and IT processes throughout the organization. Yes, it's also a failure of the developers for not seeking a properly architected application. It's a failure of the operations teams for not understanding how this is going to integrate. But overall, it is a complete institutional failure. Effective Agile gives us a way to solve technical debt. Aaliyah called it security debt. It's exactly the same thing. Let's take an example where we are doing Agile drops every month. one iteration a month, going straight out to the users. First iteration goes out there, and we've got it working as best we can. It's been okayed by the ops team, and it has been deployed. During that month, issues will arise. Users will say, we don't like this, we want that changing. But more importantly, operations may say, look, we're concerned about this, we're getting these number of failure calls. Security team might come up and say, look, here's been a zero-day advisory come out. We've got to deal with this. That means at the start of the third iteration, because those issues will come up during the second month iteration, by the time we get to the third iteration, we are actually saying, okay, of the 8 things we can deal with this month, what is already known as a security problem? That goes top of the list. In no other application development methodology do we have a process by which we can so quickly and so readily begin to address technical and security debt. And this is where we have a process that works for us. But again, it must be designed in from the beginning, and it must be part of an engagement with the security teams as well as the developers. If we're going to use Agile for continuous delivery, we must then make sure that the test processes we use for test-driven development are in place, so that as it is written, it is continually tested. We see that already for developers. We already see large amounts of unit tests every time code is checked in to prevent bad code entering into the source code libraries. We need to step that further. We need to have more complex automated tests before it even enters QA. If we're going to bypass QA and go straight to operations, those tests must be rigorous. They must be written by a joint team of operations, application and security. They must be approved by all 3, and they must be an automated process. And there has to be an acceptance that that may mean on some months there is no iteration because the code is rejected by the test process. That gives us not only secure by design, that gives us secure by delivery. We must also accept that Agile is not the answer to everything we need to do inside our development shop. So, 5 quick takeaways from me. Firstly, no IT system, hardware or software should be deployed without architectural consideration. If you do that, you're just going to end up in chaos and you get what you deserve. Build effective processes, irrespective of whether it be an operational, a security, a developer or a management process. Build them, make sure they work, and use those as the foundation for all of your software design. Secure by design will only work if backed by secure by delivery. And everybody must be involved, especially the security teams. They've got to stop sitting on the sideline and they've got to get involved. Rapid resolution of technical debt issues minimizes the risk of a security breach. That is a key point. We have to now say, we've got a technical debt, a security debt process, use it. Don't wait for a half-year or a one-year point where you say, okay, what are those things that are built up and we'll just use this entire iteration for it. By the time you get to your third iteration, you should already be implementing some of your points of debt. And finally, stop blaming developers. We all cock it up. We all make mistakes. Let's live with it. Let's work with it. Stephen, all yours.
Thank you very much, Ian. Our next speaker, I'm just going to ask him to introduce himself very briefly and then join the panel discussion later. Wahid Iqbal, who is Technical Security Officer at Shop Direct. But Wahid, do you just want to say a few words by way of introduction, just a perspective on who you are, what your role is, and how you work with these type of issues in your business?
Hello there, I'm Wahid Iqbal. I'm from Shop Direct, and I'm the Technical Security Manager. There's a bit of a title there, I think. What I do is to do what the previous speakers have said: engage with the architecture team, engage with the software development team, and get the security involved at the early stage of development. And that's what I'm currently doing at the moment. And it's a very rapid, agile environment I'm working in at the moment, and we are pressured by business to deliver new sites within very tight deadlines. And part of that process, we want to do is to make sure the code is secure, and also the development process is delivered in a methodical way.
Of course. Could you just tell the audience, because not everyone might be familiar with you, just tell us a little bit about Shop Direct, if that's okay.
Shop Direct is one of the largest online retailers. You might have heard of some of the brands like Littlewoods, Very.com, Woolworths, Isme. They are the just online brands we have for catalogues. Basically, it's just we have a window shop online and we have a catalogues what we send out to our customers, and they order stuff from us online, from anything from a kettle to a washing machine. We cater for everyone, for every age, and that's what we are. We also the company itself is part of the Barclay Brothers empire, and you've probably heard of them recently.
And it's very much a business-to-consumer operation in that case, isn't it? So you've got two issues there. One is you've got to be responsive, and the other issue is that you have to be secure, because you're taking people's payment information, for instance. So presumably you have to comply with things like PCI DSS, do you?
PCI DSS is what we have to comply with. However, the good thing is we have outsourced our payment provider. The payment process is outsourced. However, the customer data is where we are really key on. We do not want our customer data to be leaked, and we take our prime crown jewels as our customer data, and that's our main key area, and that's what I'm responsible for, ensuring that our customer data doesn't get leaked out into the open.
And without wanting to preempt the panel discussion too much, because I'm sure some of this will come up then, what would you say the main positioning of your development architecture would be? Would you say that you're a secure development operation, or would you say you're an agile development operation, or are you trying to walk that fine line between the two of being secure and agile?
We're in the process of becoming a purely secure and agile development. However, it's dependent on what we're delivering and how we want to deliver it. We sometimes have an agile or a hybrid solution where we do have project managers who do a project management way of development. The waterfall technique is used, but we do actually have a combination. But currently we are in an agile world, and that's how we're working.
And just referring back to what the two previous presenters have talked about in terms of how this operates, what would you say that you're under pressure to do in terms of the business at the moment? Are you under pressure to develop more quickly, or are you under pressure to maintain a certain speed of development but with, say, a finite amount of perhaps a constant or even reducing amount of development resource? Where would you say the pressure is coming on your team at the moment as a manager?
As a technical security manager, I need to ensure that the code is ready to fit. It's ready to go live. And all the risks what we've highlighted are covered off. So with the agile process, it's always rapid. It's not always made live straight away. You have bits of codes what need to be tested. Unfortunately, the application itself can't be fully tested, so it's really difficult sometimes. And the pressure is to ensure that when the whole product is created, it's been tested before it goes live. And we're in that manual process where we do the pen tests after the event of creating the application.
And just a final question from myself before we go into the OFA's presentation and then the Q&A, but just a final question that I had thought to ask you. In terms of the awareness of security among your colleagues in the business, would you say that because you're a business-to-consumer operation, obviously you are handling people's personal data, addresses and so forth, credit card information, would you say that people are actually quite aware of the security and regulatory rules that they have to operate within, or do you think that's still something where education has to play a part?
Education is always key. You've got to keep educating all staff. That includes the developers and the end users as well. What we do have, what I feel like we have currently is we do get a lot of contractors coming in quickly from universities of all walks of life. the developers are coming in, and what we try to do is give them the basic secure coding guidelines and development guidelines before they get onto our project. That's what we try to do.
Well, thanks very much. That's really great. Just stay with us, and I'll bring you back into the panel discussion in about 10 minutes or so when we've done over slides. But I'll bring up the next poll question first. So again, it's the same thing as before. Bear with me again. This is primarily for people who are watching later in the replay, but I'll bring the slide up with the poll questions. You should be able to see that now, and then I'll activate the poll so you can vote. If you find that's getting in the way of the presentation, you can just click in the top right-hand corner to close the pop-up screen. I'll read the poll questions out for the benefit of people who are listening in later. So our third and final poll for today's session: what is the biggest issue when it comes to implementing an application security program? Is it firstly complexity and time to implement, for example, when putting in training programs or complex technologies? Secondly, previous negative experiences with automation, or thirdly, a lack of security expertise in the project organization or development team? So I will now activate the questions for you. That should be coming up on your screen now, so if you again want to close that, you just close the top window there. Well, thank you very much. I'll leave that open to the end of the session, and we'll go through some of the answers. And now, without too much further ado, I would like to hand over to Ofer Moa is Quotium's Chief Technology Officer. He's our final speaker here. He's also a regular panelist for InfoSecurity magazine. And Ofer, thank you very much for taking the time to take part. Over to you.
Thank you. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about today is basically our approach for the fast track to Agile Sdlc. So basically looking at Agile from both perspectives, Agile development, but also Agile security. So let me do a quick introduction of the company. Quotium, if you're not familiar with us, we're a software company focusing on application security and performance domain. Our product feature, I'll talk about that later, is around doing testing as part of the development life cycle, especially in the Agile development. So a few words about myself and my experience, which will relate to the rest of my discussion. I've been doing application security for a long time, for 17 years. I've done pretty much every aspect of it. I was part of a consulting company in WAF and penetration testing and defense and everything. And also, and that's the key issue, I was very involved in creating Sdlc programs for enterprise customers. And I've seen pretty much any way of trying to do it, trying to look at it, and trying to implement it. And based on that experience, we tried to build a new approach, which I'll talk about. So if you look at the classic secure development life cycle, right, and that's a great concept. If you would talk to me 10 years ago, when it's just starting out, I would say that that's the way to do it. So it's a very waterfall-y approach, not necessarily in the sense that it has to go into a waterfall development life cycle, but in the sense that it has all the takes of a waterfall approach. It's heavy, it's long, it's very thorough, but it's not necessarily easy to use. So when you look at it, right, we're talking about building a secure development life cycle. We're looking at creating the right processes into the organization, making security high priority, engaging everybody on process, right? If we look at the classical Sdlc, so we're talking requirements, development, QA, the whole process in every single way, which is of course great, right? If you ask me as a security expert, I would always tell you, engaging everybody in the process is fantastic. Having everybody trained and having all the procedures in place is fantastic. So getting the right processes for testing and reviewing and code reviewing and performing all these things, it sounds great on paper. But when we go to the reality, I have seen very few organizations that are really able to do that. So the number one problem is that security is not a high priority for developers or for the development organization. So if you know the OWASP, their organization is the Open Web Application Security Project, the largest nonprofit organization focused on application security. has done a survey with developers. What are the things they care most about when developing? Obviously, functionality and time to market, quality, performance. Security came in last out of 6 categories, right? So we're not going to likely see this idea where security is a high priority. And because it's not a high priority, and because the development has a lot of things on their plate, right? They have a lot of content to deliver. They have to deliver it on time. They have the business people on their back asking for everything to be on time or earlier. So security is kind of a necessary evil that we have to deal with, but we want to do the minimum needed effort, right? We don't want to engage in it fully. If you ask a developer about security, they tell you, look, I'll do what I have to do, but I'm not going to do anything more than that. Now, all this classical Sdlc, it creates a lot of overhead, creating all these procedures, creating all these processes, having it take a substantial overhead in each part of the process, while ideally creating great security is something that most organizations will not tolerate. Even more, every Sdlc program you look at is focused around training, right? You have to train the developers to write secure code. You have to train the testers to do testing. In my previous company, where we had a consulting company, we would sell hours and hours of training to developers and QA. It's a great process, but in a large development organization, it's very hard to maintain this, right? People are changing every 18 to 24 months. Things are a little better in Europe, but in the U.S., that's what we see. The new ones that are coming do not have security experience or knowledge because it's not part of standard training in the world, right? We all want Sdlc, but if you go to the average college or university teaching computer science, they don't teach application security. They might have one class on security, and that's usually network stuff. And on top of that, all this Sdlc, which is very procedurized and very long and very heavy, is not adapted for agile development, right? If I do a waterfall process, I can somehow integrate that, but if I have a new release every three or 4 weeks, then it's becoming a real issue. So what is Agile Sdlc? Agile Sdlc is taking the concept of Agile and putting it into a secure development lifecycle, whether your lifecycle is Agile or not. And basically, when we look at Agile, unfortunately, as was mentioned before, some people see Agile as just doing it fast. But basically, one of the main principles in Agile is doing the minimally sufficient effort, right? It's not doing the effort, but it's doing just what the minimum needed. If I'm writing requirements, I'm writing just enough requirements for the developer to understand me. I don't have to write 80 pages of requirements for one feature. And the same goes for an Agile Sdlc. Do what's needed to protect against your real vulnerabilities. Do what's needed to protect your system against attacks that may compromise your data and business. But don't just overdo security just for the purpose of security. So the point is doing a lot of quick ad hoc processes. You have a problem, deal with it when it's discovered, rather than planning everything in advance. And with an approach like this and the right solution, you do not need to train your development and QA teams on everything in advance. You can do everything as needed. I know for people who come from a lot of years of security procedures, that approach can be a little, disturbing because we like the processes. But in reality, by deploying such an approach, we are much more likely to get cooperation from the R&D. So the main point is that to do this, to do all these things that I'm talking, you need the right tools and processes. You just can't do it on your own. I'm going to steal Stephen's thunder about the first question. because I teach with the results. 70% here are saying that they're still using manual work as part of testing in their agile development. If you look at agile development, and I'm not even talking about security, if you look at the basic concept of agile development, it's continuous integration and automatic testing. It's not the point of agile development, of course, but it's the enabler. Because if we want to release new software every 3 or 4 weeks, we have to speed up our testing process. And the same goes for security. So to do that, we need something that can automatically find vulnerabilities without having to have any prior knowledge in security, right? Because we want to save on all the training. We also want something that can provide explanations to developers on how to implement the security based on what it's found, which is very easy to do, again, so you don't need to train them to understand what these findings are. They will just get the explanation. And of course, we need to be able to do that while retesting everything continuously, right? Every day, every build, to make sure no new things are there and that everything was safe. So our solution, Seeker, was designed around this approach. It's not just for Agile, of course, but it's supposed to be an Agile take on security. It's lightweight and it's fast. It's built around 3 main principles that for us make it usable for fast security, which is accuracy, the ability to identify the real vulnerabilities and pose a real threat. The key issue, if you look at code, there may be thousands of small issues in it. Most of them are not ones that you want to deal with. You have to find the real problems that hackers may use against you and focus your effort on there. That's what you can do as part of Agile development. Clarity, which is providing the developer with everything they require to secure the application. Right? We don't want to have them to go through a month of training before they start doing security. They get something, there's a problem, the software finds it, they get a quick explanation in the language they can understand, and they can apply that. And simplicity, which is making sure that anybody in the process of the development and QA can use this testing to run it. It's fast, it's easy to integrate. And again, you've all been trying to work with developers. Some of them are happier to cooperate on security, some of them less, but all of them are not able, it's not even a matter of willing, they're not able to have too large of an overhead on security because they have to deliver all the other factors which we are expecting them to deliver. So, thank you very much. If you have questions, my email is down there, and of course I'm staying for the panel discussion. I'll take one more question.
Thank you very much, Ofer. Thank you very much. Okay, so I will really just open this up to a panel discussion now, and I'm going to leave some time for audience questions and also to go through the results of the vote. In terms of how this all fits together, though, I think there is one central question which comes to my mind, which has been addressed to an extent already, but I think it's worth reiterating. How big a challenge does Agile pose to security departments? So looking at this from the CISO's point of view, from the security team's point of view, if the company, the customer, internal customer says, I want to introduce Agile, is that something that security teams really need to start worrying about? And perhaps we could start with you, Ofer, in terms of how do you think security teams generally react?
I have to apologize. I could not hear your question.
Sure. When the business comes to the security team and says, we want to introduce Agile development, is that something that the security teams need to be worried about?
So I would say that to some degree, yes, unless they want to prepare for it. So when you look, again, at traditional Sdlc, the traditional Sdlc is very structured and very procedurized, as is waterfall development. When going into Agile, you have to adapt your Sdlc. But on top of that, as mentioned in the beginning, when moving to Agile, that's normal. I think that with so many organizations, when just starting Agile, the first few weeks or months become very disorganized. People are not used to working Agile. A lot of times and they do see it as just a way to get code out quickly without going through all the processes they're used to, which is, of course, not the point, right? The point is to make quick processes, but still have them in place. So the first few months of agile development may take in them a lot of disorganization, and that normally leads to bugs and security vulnerabilities. So the point is to do it the right way. I think Wahid would talk about that better than me, but we've been starting to work with ShopDirect, and I was very impressed with how they're building the process to do it right, to do it organized, to do automatic testing, to do everything in place so that it works the right way.
Wahid, I'll come back to you on that point in a moment. If I could just ask Galia to say her point of view really in response to that. What do you see the initial reaction being in IT departments and particularly security teams when the company says, well, we need to become more agile as a business and therefore that has an impact on the way we develop our technology?
I think the problem really is cultural, not systemic. If you're going to change to something that is more, let's use the word flexible for a second, because we're not actually talking about a specific process, waterfall versus agile, but being more responsive to the business, it means that both business and IT need to work together as a team. And then you need to look at the organizational inertia of what's blocking that. And it's because the IT department doesn't understand what the issues are, or is it that the business folks can't articulate what it is they actually want and what the risks actually are? So I look at it from the point of view, yes, they should be concerned, but it should be baked in the sense of the policies are there in a way that security-conscious companies are already aware of how to build this in. For example, I'm going to use a slightly different analogy. You have people going and starting up hypervisors and starting virtual means on public cloud someplace, and they're moving healthcare data. They shouldn't be able to do that. The system should be able to warn them, hey, that's data that's under HIPAA regulation. You shouldn't be able to move that there. You should be able to bake that in terms of, as you're going through the processes, what the issues actually are. So I think it's a matter of education, personally.
Ian, how are you seeing people react?
I think the issue is whether you're talking agile for the business or agile for software development. The two are not necessarily the same, and they're not necessarily exclusive either. You can have an agile development process with a business that's not particularly fast-moving or changing. The reality, if I was in with an organization and looking at this, is that I would simply ask, are you prepared to put in place and validate all your existing processes? The point Alia made is especially a strong one. People don't start with a basis of understanding how to protect their most sensitive assets. For example, how many companies, when they start any form of software development, say, okay, what is sensitive information? What is confidential information? What is generally available information? They don't start by saying, how are we going to test for this? They don't start by saying, what does this bring to the business versus what will this cost to implement? And those are all decisions that need to be asked and made up front.
So Wahid, how have you approached this within your organisation? Because you're actually doing this on the ground. And where did the push come from? Was it a push from the business to say, can you turn things around more quickly? And then security needs to respond in kind.
You're right there. Where I came in, I was actually the group IT audit manager. And I was asking these questions, exactly the same questions. I was managing the risk within the business. And I was asking the group security director about Agile. We are working in Agile and what's going on, what the processes are. I was trying to get the audit process in place. And then soon as I found out that there wasn't a proper structured way of doing things within the business, Agile or any project, security was always looked at as a blocker to enabling the business to do what they want to do. And that's what one of my key role became, because the group director said, like, I want you on board, and I want you to bring in new processes and frameworks so we can engage the business. That's the architecture team, the software development team, the testers, the QAs, and engage them in a security confidence building, that we're not here to actually hinder their process. It's actually help them through the process of development and actually having a secure code at the end of it.
So as earlier mentioned earlier, it's about cooperation between the two spheres.
Engaging and winning them over. Because what you find with Agile, you're right there. If you can highlight the top 10 risks to that application, and they can turn that around really quick. And they actually, I've just seen that recently. We've implemented quite a lot of new processes within the business where we highlighted these 10 vulnerabilities and said, right, get this fixed now. And then within a week of Agile working, they have fixed it, and we're retesting those before they go live with the next iteration. So what we find the challenges there is keeping them on ball all the time and making sure the process is in place. And one of my tasks is to look at how they're validating the source code, and that's when I'll start looking at different products on actually automating the process, making the development process a lot easier for them. So they actually, by the time they actually say to the security team, we're ready with the application, can you validate it so we can actually put it live? We'll say, right, we went through the process of secure coding. The output of that is this. QA has actually done their QA bit where they've actually used their tooling and confirm all the vulnerabilities and all the defects. A vulnerability is a defect to the business. It's a problem. They have to sort it. How high of a problem it is, that's what they need to rank it, and that's what we're working on at the moment. We had O'Fair in recently who actually went through a program of actually speaking to all the people on our behalf and all the stakeholders, the key stakeholders, and said, right, okay, we want you to engage you with this new product we've got in line with Seeker, and how do we want to put it in? What are the deliverables from each people, and what you want out of it, and what we want out of it? And we've actually put our process in place, and at the moment we've got a report where we're implementing the recommendations for within the business from Affair. The ideal goal is to have a full process in place where security are part of the process, not the last piece of the jigsaw who stop the product going live.
And have you caught anything that you think you otherwise wouldn't have spotted?
The good thing about Seeker is it confirms vulnerabilities what exist. You're not looking around on vulnerabilities what don't exist. As you probably in the traditional pen test, you will get a confirmed vulnerability, and then you'll have a possible vulnerability that could affect, because they don't have the full understanding of the architecture. They're not embedded in the whole process from the start to finish. It's just the front end. Actually, let's say it's a cross-site scripting vulnerability. You can't confirm the full scale of that vulnerability until you know it. Does it actually get to the back-end database? Does it change? Does it actually pull out the data for the back-end at all? And that's what I like about Seeker. It does what it says on the tin. It confirms the vulnerability. It has another unique bit in there. What I like for our developers is a training part, is a video of the exploit and actually where the exploit is, so they actually can fix that exploit directly. And it speeds up the whole process, and that's what they need, speed up the process, and also it's a training tool as well.
I'm just conscious that we're slightly running out of time there, but we've tried.
Sorry, I do apologise.
No, that's not directed at you particularly, Wahid. It's just we have a fixed time for it. So I've tried to get one of our panelists to try to answer the questions already, and the other question is actually probably a little bit detailed to go into here. Hopefully, it's been covered off by the substance of the material. I'm just going to very quickly see if we can bring up the poll results, so I can give you a quick overview of the answers, and that will bring the session to a close. But our first question: how do you currently manage security applications in Agile development? The first answer was A, 19% do nothing, B, 69% rely on manual processes such as pen testing, and only 11% rely on automatic technology. Our second question, and those of you the results there, when is application security addressed in the development cycle? A, 31%. At the end before a major release, B, 25%, so a quarter, automatically as part of every build, and C, before, for example, through training, peer code, security review, and so forth. And then our final poll question, if I just bring that up, bear with me. I'll scroll down here. I would have stopped you voting first, so view the results. And the final question, what's the biggest issue in implementing application security programs? 47% said complexity and time to implement, 4% said previous negative experiences with automation, and 49% thought it was a lack of security expertise in the project, organisation or development team. So thank you very much for sharing those views with us. It is very, very useful to have that feedback as well. That does, though, bring to a close our session, I'm afraid. And thank you very much again to our speakers, to Dr. Alia Fairchild, to Ian Murphy, Wahid Iqbal and Ofer Mar for their participation and their insights and the detailed work they put into putting together this discussion for you. And, of course, to you all for taking the time out of your day to join us on behalf of Info Security Magazine. Thanks again for attending this session.